Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 783 for September 8th, 2019. This time around, I'm on location at the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Welcome Center in Louisville's Fraser History Museum, right in the middle of Whiskey Row downtown. Coming up in a few minutes.
2 weeks ago, we had sold tickets to people from 35 states and 5 countries coming into Bardstown for these events. So to say we're just a local festival isn't accurate and isn't fair. And again, that's information that we need to get out to our distilleries, because as I've shared that with them, they're like, wow, I didn't know that.
The 28th edition of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival kicks off on September 18th in Bardstown, and there are a lot of changes this year, both public and behind the scenes. The festival is in a major transition period this year, with even more changes likely in the coming months as festival directors debate its long-term future. Bardstown-Nelson County Tourism Commission Director Mike Mangeot is serving as the festival's interim director this year, and he'll join us later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the calendar of events, behind the label, the What I'm Tasting This Week department, and a whole lot more. All on this edition of WhiskyCast.
When you land on something special, you just know. Redbreast, the quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey, and a proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
From far beyond the wall comes a whiskey for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. We are starting to see more and more American distillers feeling the impact of the European Union's tariffs on bourbon and other American whiskeys. The EU's 25% tariff was imposed in July of last year as part of the ongoing trade dispute between the Trump administration and many U.S. trading partners. In some cases, whiskey makers are choosing to absorb the cost of tariffs. They're playing the long game and betting that by eating those costs now, they'll be able to keep building up their export sales. Joe Magliocco heads up Michter's, which is now exporting to 56 international markets, and is one of those exporters thinking long-term.
Obviously, the tariffs, at least short-term, affect things. Politics is above my pay grade. Our hope is that basically things get resolved. And, we're in an industry that, to begin with, is very highly taxed, in the best of times. And so, the companies in the industry are pretty good about adjusting to things. And our export business continues to grow, quite nicely. But again, we have a lot of growth opportunity because we're little.
We're expected to find out soon whether the U.S. will impose its own tariffs on Scotch, Irish, and other European whiskeys. That's not in retaliation for the EU tariffs, but comes after the World Trade Organization granted the U.S. relief for European aircraft subsidies to Airbus. The EU is expected to get a similar ruling soon from the WTO over U.S. subsidies to Boeing. Let's update a story from last week now on the collateral damage from Pernod Ricard's acquisition of Castle Brands. We reported that the $223 million deal would likely have an impact on Isle of Arran Distillers, which imports its whiskeys into the U.S. through Castle Brands. In fact, the Arran, Robert Burns, and Macri Moore brands were listed in all of the news releases announcing the deal. We confirmed this week with Arran Managing Director Ewan Mitchell that the brands are not actually part of the deal. As he put it in an email, they have no plans to make French their official language yet and will remain firmly independent. Mitchell and his team also did not get any advance notice of the deal or a look at the news releases before they went out. However, they will have to relaunch those brands in the U.S. with a new importer once the Castle Brands deal closes. And that's going to play havoc with a new packaging design Arran has just introduced. The reason? U.S. laws require that the importer of record be listed on the label, and the importer is also responsible for applying for label approvals. That means once Arran and Castle Brands part ways, any remaining inventory with old labeling can't be shipped to distributors, and Arran will have to work out a deal quickly with a new importer to minimize the transition time. Fans of Japanese whiskey are likely to snap up Suntory's latest batch of Hibiki 21-year-old. The award-winning Japanese blend had been thought to have disappeared because of supply shortages, but the online retailer Decanta announced this weekend that a new batch of Hibiki 21 has been released. The 2019 edition sells for $899 a bottle. Meanwhile, the Whiskey Exchange in London is lowering the price of one whiskey to celebrate the store's 20th anniversary. Back in 1999, the price for a bottle of 1976 Ardbeg Manager's Choice was a whopping £99 a bottle, and it was only available at the distillery's shop on Islay. Today, that bottle is worth £7,500 or so, if you can find one. Whiskey Exchange co-owner Sukhinder Singh has one in his personal collection and told me this weekend here in Louisville that his staff convinced him to sell it for the original $19.99 price of £99. It didn't take much convincing. The winner will be picked through an online ballot that opens next Monday, September 16th, and goes through the 22nd. We have posted a link to sign up for the drawing at the WhiskyCast website. Let's do a quick roundup of some of the new whiskeys introduced recently, and we'll start with the celebrity stuff first. Scottish actor Sam Heughan of Outlander fame is known as a Scotch whiskey fan, and he'll be coming out with a new Scotch whiskey brand. The Sassenach will be a blended Scotch, though that's all we know for now. We'll have more details as they become available. And turning from Outlander to Downton Abbey, there will be a new blended Scotch with the Downton Abbey brand coming out to coincide with the release of the Downton Abbey movie later this month. And Diageo is releasing two new Game of Thrones tie-ins with Johnny Walker, A Song of Fire and A Song of Ice. A Song of Fire features Kalila as the dominant malt in the blend, while A Song of Ice highlights Kleinlich. They'll both sell for around $36 each in the U.S. Both will also be available worldwide. Other new whiskeys unveiled this week. Irish Distillers is adding two new whiskeys to its Method and Madness range. Both are single pot still whiskeys. One is finished in wild cherry wood, while the other is finished in French acacia wood. The wild cherry finish will be available in Ireland, the UK, France, and global travel retail, while the wild cherry wood finish is exclusive to the Celtic Whisky Shop in Dublin. Both are priced at €92 each. That's about $102 at current exchange rates. Highland Park has released the final whiskey in its Viking Legends series. Valfather is the follow-up to last year's release of Valknut and the 2017 debut of Valkyrie. Valfather is being billed as Highland Park's peatiest whiskey yet. It has a recommended retail price of £60 in the UK, around $74 at current exchange rates. It is slated for a U.S. release soon. U.S. pricing has not been announced. Last November, we heard from Kevin Abrook of William Grant & Sons about the new Airstone single malts from Scotland's Ailsa Bay distillery. At the time, they were exclusively available at Tesco stores in the UK. Now, both the Airstone Sea Cask and Land Cask 10-year-old malts are coming to the U.S. They were created as entry-level single malts and will carry a recommended retail price in the U.S. of $28.99 each. At the other end of the scale in the Grant's stable, Glenfiddich is unveiling Grand Cru. It's a 23-year-old single malt finished in French cuvée casks. It'll be available worldwide. The price tag, $300 a bottle. And finally, I'm in Louisville this weekend for the inaugural induction ceremony of the Order of the Writ. It was created by the Kentucky Distillers Association to honor individuals for their contributions to Kentucky bourbon. Now, if that sounds like a similar group based in Scotland, well, Order of the Writ Governor Chris Morris says that's because it is.
Well, it was inspired by the Keepers of the Quake and the Worshipful Company of Distillers, But we're a lot less formal because we're Kentucky bourbon based, and we thought to forego the black ties and the secret handshakes and all that wonderful stuff. This is about Kentuckians getting together, having a good time, Kentucky bourbon fans getting together and having a good time. So this is a society of people who appreciate, promote, protect the heritage of Kentucky bourbon on a global basis. So it's a global organization, and this is its inaugural event.
Now, we heard about this a couple of years ago when you guys first came up with the idea through the KDA, but what took so long to actually get to tonight?
Well, it did take a long time because we were starting from scratch, did not want to be like the other great societies, had to make our own way. And also, if you go back just a few years ago, we did not have that many members in the KDA. And it's a little difficult when you're basically shorthanded on resources. But in the last few years, we've had a number of new members join who could augment our numbers and bring more life to this program. And now here we are.
Where do you expect this organization to do in between induction ceremonies? What's going to be the goal here? I know there is at least some scholarship, some charitable work planned.
Yes, there will be charitable activities as the numbers grow and we have more members. We're going to start having other programs, other events over the course of the year, such as our annual corn planting in the Sacred Acre in Bourbon County, where we're growing corn for the order. We will have a harvest celebration as well when you'll help harvest that acre of corn. So we've got a lot of fun things planned, but again, it's going to take a number of years for them to all come to fruition.
Let's talk about that Sacred Acre. What exactly is this?
Well, Jacob Spears' farm is intact. He's buried on the farm, and he, according to historians, could have been the very first distiller in Kentucky. So we have, the order has an acre on his farm, which we call the Sacred Acre, where we're growing heirloom corn, and that goes to one member distillery a year to make bourbon out of. His spring house is still there, and maybe the oldest warehouse in the state is still there. So we're using those facilities, that water, that land to help propagate the history of bourbon whiskey.
And eventually there'll be bourbon from this Sacred Acre available.
Yes, the first barrels were laid down at the Woodford Reserve Distillery last year.
Full disclosure, I was part of the inaugural class of inductees, along with fellow writers F. Paul Packel, Fred Minnick, Tony Sachs, and Mike Veach, as well as an all-star list of distillery executives, and I was nominated by KDA President Eric Gregory. I should note that I paid my own initiation fee and travel expenses for the weekend. And by the way, would like to wish Eric Gregory a speedy recovery. He had to miss the evening after undergoing back surgery the other day. We hope he's up and around soon. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. Keeping American whiskey history and tradition alive isn't just a marketing slogan, it's part of Heaven Hill's fabric. When other distillers were getting out of the rye whiskey business, Heaven Hill saved the legendary Rittenhouse rye from becoming a footnote in the history books. Today, it's the rye whiskey of choice, in a cocktail or neat, with a distinct spicy flavor all its own. Find out more at heavenhilldistillery.com. Think wisely, drink wisely. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. The Whiskey Extravaganza's fall series of events kicks off this coming Thursday night in Chicago. The Banff Whiskey Experience is Friday and Saturday in Banff, Alberta. The next Virginia Craft Spirits Roadshow is on Saturday at the Virginia War Memorial in Richmond. That same day is the Balcones Bourbon Fest in Waco, Texas. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society's U.S. series of gatherings kicks off on the 17th in New York City. Whiskey Live Moscow is on the 20th and 21st, along with Whiskey Live China in Changsha on the 21st and 22nd. Sagamore Spirits' final Whiskey on the Waterfront night of the summer is on the 21st in Baltimore, Maryland. The Whiskey Show is September 28th and 29th in London. Elixir in San Francisco has a Compass Box limited editions tasting with John Glazer at the Fort Mason Firehouse on October 2nd, just ahead of Whiskey Fest San Francisco on the 4th. Whisky Ottawa is on October 4th and 5th in Canada's capital city. The Great American Whiskey Fair is on the 5th in Columbia, South Carolina. And Whisky Live Paris is October 5th through the 7th. Those are just a few of the 196 different events we have right now on the searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. Just click on the search button to find out what's happening near you or wherever you'll be traveling soon.
From deep in the north, far beyond the wall, the howl of the frozen wind brings word of something new. A whiskey from the land of always winter, for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock. The Kentucky Bourbon Festival gets underway on the 18th in Bardstown, Kentucky, the bourbon capital of the world. The festival usually draws more than 50,000 visitors to Bardstown each year from all over the U.S. and other countries. But this year, it'll look a bit different. The lawn in front of Spalding Hall will open earlier in the weekend as usual and be closed on Sunday. But most of the changes this year have been behind the scenes, with a complete turnover in the festival's staff. After Executive Director Jill Hawkins stepped down earlier this year, Bardstown-Nelson County Tourism Commission Director Mike Mangeot stepped in to serve as Executive Director for this year, while the festival's directors look at its long-term future. Mangeot and I talked about some of the long-term challenges, along with changes to this year's event.
Hopefully the public's not really going to see any difference other than maybe some changes and improvements in the festival. We have had basically complete staff turnover, and that happens in business sometimes. But as far as moving forward with the festival, we're planning on improving on some things and expanding some things. Specifically, our great lawn. If you've ever been to the festival, in front of Spalding Hall, we have it's kind of a big marketplace with some juried vendors, but also the distilleries are out there with their products, mainly merchandise. This year, due to some changes in the law here in Kentucky, our distilleries who are participating are going to be able to sell cocktails on the lawn and straight pours. So, that's an opportunity for somebody to come down and without having to, buy a ticket to one of our ticketed events, be able to interact and truly get a taste, pun intended, of of all the great products that we have here. And then the other thing we're doing on the lawn is we're going to have an education stage there. We're going to have master distillers and brand ambassadors up there, talking about product, talking about the history of bourbon, why it's important to Bardstown and in Kentucky. So those are a couple of new elements for this year.
Anything else new to go along with the more traditional events like the master distillers sampler and the ball on Saturday night and stuff like that?
Well, Saturday night, actually, one of the things that kept coming back to us was the Gala, the Great Kentucky Bourbon Tasting and Gala, which is our big historically black tie event and dinner on Saturday night, was getting a little stale. And folks were like, I really don't want to, it's been a long week. We don't want to sit through a 2-hour dinner. And I get that. So what we've done is changed it around a little bit. The tasting is still going to be there. The distilleries go all out for that. We appreciate that. We've added a VIP hour to that from 7 to 8, where we're asking the distilleries to come in and do some higher end pours. That's almost sold out. We're limiting that to 200 people, and I think we've already sold about 180 tickets to that. But then the regular tasting go from 8 to 9:30. But at 9:30 was usually about the time we started moving in the back for the dinner. We're just going to have a cocktail party, live band immediately playing, a lot of other entertainment, big food stations. Just a way to kind of end the festival on a high note. Thank everybody, all the sponsors and guests for coming in, and just have a good time.
That sounds pretty logical to me, because I've been to that gala a few times, and if you were sitting in the back of the room, you couldn't hear what anybody on the stage was saying, and we were just basically waiting for the band to start.
Yeah, and that's part of the facility, part of the size of the group, and let's be honest. I mean, it's people don't want to sit there after that and listen to one more toast and everything else. And I don't want that to come off as a criticism. It's just, we've been doing this for 27 years, and this will be our 28th year, and you have to make changes and adjustments. And it's something that some folks were telling us, well, you can't change that because it's such a tradition. And I honestly have not had one complaint about the change. So we're excited about that. We think it's going to, just be a nice way to finish off the festival. And when I say finish off the festival, I truly mean that. Traditionally, we've gone through Sunday on the lawn. We're not doing that this year. We're actually starting earlier on Thursday at noon. We're going Thursday through Saturday night on the lawn, and there won't be anything on Sunday. So if you've come down and traditionally come on Sunday, you're going to miss it. So you need to come down a little earlier.
Explain the reasoning behind that, because I know a lot of folks, Sunday was the big day for them to come down because they'd have other stuff to do on Saturday. You had high school football on Friday night, things like that, that had already started up. Why change it so that you're not running on Sunday this year?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, traditionally the lawn's been open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we get a lot of day trippers that come in on Wednesday and Thursday looking for activities. They don't have tickets, but they've heard about the festival and want to come down. And we really didn't have any type of activities going on those days. This year, with kind of the turnover that you mentioned, we looked at condensing the festival and really making it a Thursday through Saturday festival, just from the standpoint of staffing and everything else. We've been able to add a couple of events, one event in particular on Wednesday that's not on the lawn, but we felt like, look, if we're going to open up, we need to be open. And honestly, in Mark and talking to our vendors on the lawn, they didn't do a lot of sales on that day. The vendors have actually said, we're fine with not having Sunday. So it'll be a change. And yes, there will be some folks who like to come down and casually walk around on Sunday. But, we're really wanting folks to come down Thursday, Friday, Saturday. By adding Thursday, no music Thursday night out of deference to our neighbors down here along 5th Street and Flagey Avenue in Bardstown. But, we are going to have music Friday and Saturday night. Friday and Saturday really haven't changed. The difference is we're opening Thursday at noon on the lawn and nothing on Sunday.
Let's talk about new events. What else is going on besides having the lawn open on Thursday and Friday?
We have a lot of educational seminars going on in our chapel here in Spalding Hall. Moonshine University is working with us on 2 of them. One's from field to fermentation. It's going to talk about the bourbon making process from the grains they make all the way through fermentation. They're also doing one called the Science of Maturation. Focuses on the maturation process of whiskey, how the barrel impacts it, how storage of the liquid, or how it impacts the storage of the liquid. If you want to go to the science route, then we have some fun ones, called Sip and Savor, where you can come in and learn how to pair some foods with whiskeys. Chocolate, that a lot of people don't think about, as one of our courses, and the other one is actually pairing it with country ham. And Steve Coombs, who's a noted writer and restaurateur out of Louisville, is doing those for us. The Master Distillers Auction is taking place on Saturday, which is some rare whiskeys and hard to find bottles that benefits the Oscar Getz Whiskey Museum here in Spalding Hall. So, and then we've also got a couple bourbon cocktail mixology courses where you can come in and learn how to make an old fashioned or a Manhattan. So just some fun stuff going on.
Let's talk about the more serious stuff now. How much of this decision was connected to you guys having to go up against Bourbon and Beyond in Louisville this same weekend?
Well, I think, we were here first, is what I would say. We've been here 27 years, so I'd say we went up against them. I'd kind of flip that around and say they came in on top of us. But, I think we're seeing some benefit out of it. I think some folks who are planning on coming in for that music festival are saying, hey, let's go down maybe a day or two early and visit the Bourbon Festival. So we are seeing some benefit out of that. But it's a challenge, and the true challenge comes not necessarily from the attendees, because if you're going to a music festival to see Robert Plant, you're going to the music festival. The bourbon's a great addition to that. Folks we haven't come down here are interested in the bourbon, and there is room for both. But the big challenge really is the stress it puts on the resources of the distilleries. The frontline personnel who are working both events. That's the big stress. So as a board, and I served on the board before being named interim director, and I am interim. This is not something I'm going to do full time. I have another full-time job in tourism. But we are looking at what future impact that has on the festival. Can we stay on this weekend up against them? and we're going through a strategic planning process right now we'll make those decisions very soon.
You have put a question on the tee that I was just about to ask, because I have heard rumors going around the distillery community that this may be the last year for a September Kentucky Bourbon Festival, that there is some talk about moving to June next year and maybe making it closer to the Kentucky Bourbon Affair events. Is that true?
Well, there has been some rumor about that. I can tell you that during our last board meeting and discussion on this, June was pretty much ruled out. I think you will see the Bourbon Festival stay in this time period. Whether or not it's this exact weekend or we shift a week one way or the other is where I feel like the conversation's going. I've heard those rumors as well. That some folks from the Bourbon Festival may have approached other people about swapping dates and moving to June. I'm not aware of any of that. If that's occurred, nothing official has occurred on that. So, we like the September month. We were here before there was a National Bourbon Heritage Month. And I like to say that we are the authentic and original bourbon festival. And there's value in that. The reality comes down to what ROI are we as a festival providing back to our distillery partners, to our customers, and can we continue that level of expectation and service to both of them with that competition out there. So, and there has been discussion about, Bourbon Affair tying in that week with Bourbon and Beyond. So that would be another added pressure on us. So, but I can pretty much categorically say we're not moving to June.
You mentioned your other day job, if you want to put it that way, as executive director of the Bardstown-Nelson County Tourism Commission. So you have seen over the last several years this whole big boom in bourbon tourism. Tell me what it means to you from the tourism planner's point of view and the tourism industry side to have so many people descending on Bardstown with the new distilleries that have opened up, the new attractions, and everything that's really sort of helped cement Bardstown as the bourbon capital of the world.
Yeah, I think for many years, honestly, Mark, I don't want to say we didn't embrace it, because we've called ourselves the bourbon capital of the world for 50 years or more. But it wasn't the focus of our advertising. It was kind of, in marketing, it really was kind of a situation where, everybody knows about us. Let's talk about some of the other things. My old Kentucky home, which is a great attraction, and we were named Most Beautiful Small Town in America in 2012, and those things do set you apart. But when I came in, about a year and a half ago now into this position, and looked around, it's obvious what, in marketing, you go back to what's your unique selling proposition, that what really sets you apart. There are a lot of beautiful small towns. There are a lot of places that have historic museums and attractions like my old Kentucky home. No one can be the bourbon capital of the world but us. And when you looked at what other destinations are doing to market and the success they've had with bourbon, and I point to my friends in Louisville have done a fantastic job with that. And again, we've benefited from that in Lexington and a lot of the other destinations throughout the state. It made sense for us to really refocus our efforts and try to replant that flag that hey, we're the bourbon capital of the world. And that led to our campaign that we've done in this past year, which really says, just as wine comes from grapes, bourbon comes from Bardstown. We wanted to get across the message that, it truly is organic here. This is not the Disneyfication of bourbon or our industry. You come here, you feel it and smell it in the air, and you see the rick houses, and you see the people who work in the distilleries every day, and people have embraced it, and it's been a great success for us so far.
Let's talk about the other issue that Bardstown has faced, though, along with this growth in bourbon tourism, is the, shall we say, lack of infrastructure. You don't have a lot of hotel space. It's hard for people to stay in Bardstown. There's really only a couple of places you can stay that actually have more than 10 or 15 rooms. And I know that there's some work being done along those lines, but where does that stand in terms of getting more hotel space?
Well, and you're exactly right. We've been a day trip. I mentioned that earlier for a lot of folks. We're a stopover, and it's improving. We have 2 properties currently under construction right now. We have a Holiday Inn Express and a Fairfield Inn. They'll add about 200 rooms to our inventory, and that may not sound like much, when you see Louisville adding 5,000 rooms last year. But for us, right now I've got about 400 hotel rooms plus, about another 100 with bed and breakfast and Airbnbs and things like that. So that's a significant increase in, percentage-wise to us. And then I know of two other properties that are considering us. So the growth and the potential growth is there for us, which is great. It opens up more opportunities for us, as you just said, not just from the leisure travel market, the couples and the small groups coming in for a long weekend, but it also opens up the motor coach market for us. Motor coaches usually when they come in, you've got anywhere from 25 to 50 people on those motor coaches who want to spend money in your community. It'll allow us to be, we can market ourselves now as a hub and spoke. You can stay here, get to Louisville in under an hour, get to Lexington just a little bit over an hour, get to Frankfurt in under an hour, and even Nashville in 2.5. So if you don't want the big city headaches, I'll call it that, of traffic and everything else, we're a really good option. And the value there from a motor coach standpoint, if they stop in your town, they're going to spend on average, and I get this from the American Bus Association, they'll spend on average about $4,000 between food and shopping. You get them to overnight, and you can double that and then some. So the having the hotel rooms is critically important for us, and I'm very excited that we're getting those. I'm already getting calls. I had a call from a motor coach operator yesterday, as a matter of fact, asking me about it, wanting to bring a group in, not this October, but next October. So, they're planning that far in advance. So being able to tell them we've got this many new properties and working with the hoteliers on putting some packages together with our attractions, I think will be a big benefit, not just for the distilleries, but for all of our attractions.
And would also help in terms of having a banquet space and things like that for the Bourbon Festival. One of your big problems in the past, at least not a problem, but an opportunity, so to speak, is the Guthrie Opportunity Center, where you have most of the big events. For lack of a better term, it is essentially a great big warehouse, and it's not really designed as a banquet, entertainment, events-style facility, and you guys have to refit that every year to make that happen. But having a dedicated events center might make the Gala and the Master Distillers Sampler somewhat more easy to pull off.
Well, and you're right, and the Go Center has been a tremendous partner with us. The good news for them is they're growing and adding, more capabilities, I guess, and more businesses actually inside that center. So we've actually lost some available space over the last couple of years. But you're right. Even though neither of our hotels that are being built right now have large event space, I think that will be coming down the road. And it's the chicken or the egg when it comes to something like that. Do you build this? Does an investor build an event center and hope the hotel rooms follow, or do you wait for the hotel rooms and then build the event center? Venues are a struggle here. We are a small town. Venues are a struggle. I think they've done a fantastic job. What we need to look at in the future, I think, moving forward is, with all the investments that our distilleries are making on their campuses, what events can we do on their campuses to highlight them more, get people into their doors a little more, while maintaining the downtown presence here on the lawn, and really that this is where the hometown and authenticity comes in, feel of being in the bourbon capital is really on the lawn. But I think there are ways to balance that, and that's what we'll be looking at moving forward.
Anything else you can add I didn't ask about?
No, I the only thing I would say, honestly, Mark, is, and I appreciate your interest in the festival and your knowledge of the festival, we could not do this without the support of our distilleries. And one of the things that we've been talking about in my year and a half on the board here is how do we generate more ROI back to them? And that is really what we're trying to do here with the cocktails on the lawn and everything else. And at the same time, try to set up the festival for continued financial success. We want to make sure it's financially viable moving forward. And we talked about the strategic plan that we're putting together right now. This is not something we're doing. We've hired a consultant. It's not something we're doing just among the board members. We've hired a consultant. We're looking at festivals all around the country of similar size, of focus. How are you structured? What's your board structure and governance like? How are your sponsorships packaged? Do you outsource your events? What kind of staff do you have? We really want a good gauge as we move forward and make these decisions in the next, I almost said next year, but really in the next few months, as far as how we continue to make this festival grow and prosper and be a benefit to our partners. And that's really key that I want to get out there. I guess, I don't know if it was McCartney or John Lennon. The rumors of our demise are wrong, and I'm doing a very poor paraphrase of that quote. But
I think it was
we're
actually
doing well.
Mark Twain, but
was it Twain?
Yeah, I think it was actually Mark Twain.
I quoted Twain on something else. Maybe I was giving him too much credit, but anyway, trying to do two jobs right now. My wife said I'm, going to be a split personality, and I'm feeling like that right now. But so I'm a little scattered. But we're going to get this done, and we're going to do it well. And I'm a believer in doing fewer things better. And I think 4 of our events are already completely sold out, with 2 or 3 more very close. And I think that's a good sign. That tells me that the audience is there for us. One of the knocks on our festival, I think, and I'll call it a knock, and I don't know that it's true. Well, I know it's not true now. Is, oh, you're a local festival. It's all the locals that come. Well, and I haven't looked at this in a couple of weeks, so I'm sure it's increased. But I pulled an inventory report, a sales report of where all of our folks are coming from, and 2 weeks ago we had sold tickets to people from 35 states and 5 countries coming into Bardstown for these events. So to say we're just a local festival isn't accurate and isn't fair. And again, that's information that we need to get out to our distilleries, because as I've shared that with them, they're like, wow, I didn't know that. So it's really just trying to adjust and provide all the information that we can to them to make sure that they value the investment they make in this festival. I will quote something that my father used to say, and Dad ran the Kentucky Derby Festival for many years, and when he took it over, it was about to close its doors, and look at it now. But I asked him one time, he was about 5 years in, I said, what changed? And he said, we took our hat out of our hand and put it on our head and started doing business with people. And that's what we need to do here. And we're doing it. We're seeing positive results. And, I honestly think for this festival, the best is yet to come.
Mike Mangeot made it clear that he is only doing this for 1 year. The plan is to start the hiring process for a new executive director within a couple of weeks after the festival ends on September 22nd, and have that person in place by year's end. That's also when the consultants are expected to have their recommendations for the festival's future in place. We'll keep you posted as that process moves ahead. WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. Let's start off with the 2019 Parker's Heritage Collection edition from Heaven Hill. It's the 13th release in this series, and this year's edition is a heavily charred rye that's just short of 9 years old. It's bottled at 52.5% ABV. The char is evident on the nose with campfire wood and ashes, along with baking spices, dark chocolate, espresso beans, and a hint of pipe tobacco. The taste is spicy but still smooth with clove, cinnamon, chili powder, and a hint of black pepper, along with campfire smoke, pipe tobacco, and a hint of honey. The finish is very long, and it fades away gently with nice spices and honey sweetness in good balance. I'm scoring the 2019 Parker's Heritage Collection Heavy Char Rye Whiskey a 93. Next up, Eddie Russell's latest Master's Keep Cornerstone Rye from Wild Turkey. This one comes from ryes between 9 and 11 years old. It's bottled at 54.5% ABV. The nose is spicy with toasted rye bread, baking spices, caramel candy apples, and hints of honey and vanilla. The taste is spicy and intense with black pepper, clove, and cinnamon that are complemented nicely by honey, toasted vanilla, and a hint of caramel candy apples in the background. The finish is long with slowly fading spices and hints of honey and caramel. I'm scoring the Wild Turkey Master's Keep Cornerstone Rye a 94. And finally, let's look at the oldest Whistle Pig Rye release yet, the new 18-year-old Double Malt Rye. It's bottled at 46% ABV and uses both malted and unmalted rye, along with malted barley in the mash bill. The nose is very aromatic with notes of toasted rye bread, honey, berry cobbler, and hints of baking spices. The taste has a thick, chewy mouthfeel with spices that come alive slowly but build up to a great crescendo, then fade slowly to reveal notes of honey, vanilla, berry cobbler, and a hint of rye bread. The very long finish fades away smoothly with lingering spices. It's a dram that deserves some time. I'm scoring the Whistle Pig Rye 18-year-old double malt a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 2,600 different whiskeys from all over the world at WhiskyCast.com. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. Rye whiskey was distilled by America's original risk-takers and history makers. Those first barrels of whiskey were bold, flavorful, and full of passion. Sagamore Spirit proudly picked up the torch with their spring-fed Maryland-style rye whiskey, celebrating the grit and glory of those patriotic ancestors who sipped their way into American history. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com to explore their award-winning spirit.
The search never ends, but it's nice when you can come in for a landing, pause, and explore the silky smoothness of single pot still Irish whiskey, matured in the finest bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks. Land on Redbreast, then be sure to pass it on. Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Let's open up the inbox now for your voice, presented by Lot 40. Last week we introduced Sagamore Spirit as our newest sponsor on WhiskyCast. Got this email from Tim Mushaw this week. Hi, Mark. Just finished listening to the latest podcast. While I'm suffering from my old cold, nowhere near as debilitating as your Australian death flu, though. Last Sunday, a group of us took a tour of Sagamore Spirit as one of my friends happened to get a 6-pack of free tickets. Nice tour, and it was interesting to see them in production. The last couple of distillery tours I took were when the places were shut down, so it was nice seeing wort bubbling away and new make trickling through the spirit safe. The reason I'm writing is because I thought you might like this photo. It was taken in their bottling room where they had a few random barrels lying around. Rye isn't my favorite whiskey of choice, but I'll still keep my eye out for this one should they ever have a special release. I tried to get some of my friends to help me sneak it out to the van, but the tour guide kept too close an eye on us. Bother. Cheers, Tim. And the photo Tim sent along was a barrel labeled Isla Scotch Finish Rye Whiskey. We had a photo of that same barrel sent in earlier this summer, and it's one of the experimental barrels they're testing out at Sagamore Spirit. Thanks for the email and the photo, Tim. Back in June, I shared an email from a listener who was worried about being able to enjoy whiskeys after they were diagnosed as being allergic to barley. And I suggested that they should talk to their doctor to see what their tolerance levels might be, since we know that people with gluten issues are generally okay with whiskeys, since gluten doesn't make it through the distilling process. Well, I heard back from them this week. Hi, Mark. Hope you're doing well. Thanks again for your wise counsel regarding my allergy. I'm happy to report my barley allergy does not appear to be preventing me from being able to enjoy whiskey. I'm not anaphylactic, so the risk wasn't terribly high. My latest discovery is that I love Elmer T. Lee. Hopefully, I find a bottle outside my local whiskey bar, where I had the Nika coffee grain whiskey last night at a sushi bar. Also good. Thanks again for your advice. I'm so glad you were right. Keep up the amazing work. You're bringing clarity to a crazy industry. I really liked your recent take about the challenges of online liquor sales in the U.S. Great take. Cheers. Thank you for the update and the kind words, and I'm glad you're able to keep enjoying whiskeys. Now, if you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your voice is presented by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's wrap things up now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and all that other stuff that combine to make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. This is one of those questions that comes up from time to time, and it came up again this week on Quora.com, where I answer whiskey questions from time to time. Should single malt Scotch be stored with the bottle on its side like wine, or does that not matter since there is no cork to dry out? Well, first of all, the premise of that question is completely wrong, since most whiskeys, whether they're single malts or not, do use corks. However, the answer does still matter, since storing a bottle of whiskey on its side can do a lot of damage to the cork in a relatively short period of time. Most wines max out at around 15% alcohol by volume, but whiskeys start at 40% ABV, and that higher alcohol level will dry out and degrade a cork in just a couple of years. It's always better, wherever possible, to store bottles of whiskeys and other distilled spirits standing straight up. The only reason to put them on their side might be to save space, but you'd be doing a lot more damage over time than the saved space would justify. Now, what about screw caps? We are seeing them more and more on whiskeys, but generally still in the lower priced end of the market. Theoretically, you could store a screw cap sealed whiskey on its side, but once that screw cap has been opened, there's always a possibility that the threads on the screw cap could leak, especially if you crank that cap down tightly when closing it. It's just safer to store your whiskeys standing straight up. If you have something you'd like us to look at on Behind the Label, just use the contact form at WhiskyCast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you can find links for our WhiskyCast HD videos and the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast, the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the whiskey photo of the week, and a complete archive of past episodes all the way back to 2005. Special thanks again to the Fraser History Museum for letting us record this episode in the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Welcome Center at the Fraser. You'll find a link for the museum in our show notes, too. Want to make sure you never miss a single episode of WhiskyCast? All you have to do is click on the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app, whether you use Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or another app. That way, you'll get every episode as soon as it drops. You can also listen to us on Spotify and your home smart speaker, too. We love hearing from you. Get in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at WhiskyCast. The email address again, comments@whiskycast.com.
From far beyond the wall comes a whiskey for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
When you land on something special, you just know. Redbreast, the quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey, and a proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2019, and normally comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey, but this time I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, on the heart of Whiskey Row downtown. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.